Welcome beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy. Like countless others, Reiki found me when I wasn't even looking, and then it ignited a whole new world of questions. This podcast explores topics of interest for the spiritually curious. Join me for discussions and special guests on subjects such as past lives, crystal healing, spiritual awakening, ascension, energy healing, and more, all to assist and inspire you along your unique soul's journey. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy. Today's very special guest is Michael Smith. He's a numerologist and psychic medium who began this part of his journey in 2014 when he experienced a profound awakening, igniting his passion for exploring the depths of numerology and unlocking his intuitive abilities. His research in numerology has focused on the prime pattern of the base of 12 through the lens of physics. He discovered it reflects the geometry of consciousness. Michael has written 2 books and also shares his knowledge through his YouTube channel called Base 12 Universe. Michael, I just want to thank you for being with us, and I'm really excited to discuss the science and spirituality of Base 12 numerology. Base 12 numerology. It was a new term for me. So I like going into new territory. So you mentioned, in the bio right there about an awakening. And so if you could touch in on that for us and give us a little bit of your background before we dive deep, that would be really great.
Well, for sure. Yeah, and thanks for the invitation. Yeah, it's always love to chat about Base 12, which, yeah, it does take a little to get your noodle around when we have a lifetime of working with the decimal system, Base 10. So the right back in my youth, I was a very curious and inquisitive kid, and up through high school, I was always loved math and science. Not everyone loves math, but I'm sorry, I'm one of them, and really loved art as well. So it's a very creative type, but I was, asking a million questions why, and that carried over into, as I'm growing up, I had real skepticism about anything I couldn't see, touch, or really rationalize. So despite having a religious upbringing, my dad was an Anglican minister. It just didn't resonate, so I just kept asking those why questions, and always a very physical viewpoint. So that launched me into a very material-based career as a mechanical engineer and a statistician. So it was really about all discovering about numbers from a quantitative perspective. But it was interesting. Even early on, I was drawn towards quality. So I started as a quality engineer. So it's sort of the physical duality of looking at the world in terms of numbers, both as quality and quantity. But over the course of my 30-year career as an engineer, it sort of morphed from sort of the quality and the patterns of numbers and what they represent to strictly numbers, to making production counts. And over the course of time, my expertise sort of developed as a lean manufacturing expert, which was more or less about, to put it euphemistically, as a bit of a hatchet man for underperforming companies. So really my main focus was on finding inefficiencies, reducing labor, material, to the point of closing underperforming operations. So it was real sort of a mercenary job where my career sort of, degraded from this more idealized qualitative perspective to really a numbers game. And, and I felt it physically, emotionally, because ironically, a lot of my assignments were to put myself out of a job because I'm closing the business. So in fact, I changed jobs 17 times. So,
oh my goodness.
Which is quite a bit. But again, it paralleled that, that journey of seeing quality and quantity. But like, a lot of your listeners will relate to, we often go through that oscillation from one extreme earlier in the youth before we have that wake up call. And often we're exploring it by the same way. Here, me as a numbers guy, but more I went to numerology, so more the qualitative and spiritual aspects. So it's very interesting we're not doing anything wrong in our life path. We're not, I shouldn't have done that. There's always a reason what we're doing. And mine was always numbers based. But again, it's that duality between, qualities and quantities, which sort of, relates for all of us. But anyway, in with all these issues and my angst about my job, where I really felt a lot of discontent, my health issues were getting worse. Then in 2011, tragically, one of my brothers passed by taking his own life. And this was the second brother to do so a number of years earlier, who didn't live at home with us. So we had a lot of, unresolved grief around that. And then all of a sudden, in the fall of 2014, I was woken up one morning by my deceased brother's voice calling my name, and then clear as a bell. And it's one of those things your listeners will relate to, where you just have a knowing. It's just an absolute certainty that, okay, I feel that as being real right down to my bone, but you just can't rationalize it. Me, the number cruncher. So I'm saying, okay, I'm having a midlife crisis or something. But then over the course of the next days and weeks, I started getting mediumship images and little messages, mostly visual, clairvoyant messages, but also just a knowing, little downloads of these things, and little premonitions of things that would happen days later as well. So this saying, what is going on? And so I became drawn to things I'd never watched before, like the John Edward Crossing Over show. Some of your listeners may relate to. He's a famous medium, and so I got obsessed about watching that, and I just had to go to an event, something I never would have done before. And sure enough, the following week, he extended his stay in Toronto. So I went to one of his events. Both myself and my wife got profound readings. Sure enough, my two brothers in spirit were the ones who came through, and he validated, knew their names, ages, how they had passed, and what they were revisiting now. So it was really fascinating. So I was really drawn, sort of flipped a switch, spirituality switch, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I was drawn to mediumship, channeling, meditation classes. I took my Usui Reiki 1 and 2, and also reconnective healing. So, a different angle to energy healing. But I mostly fascinated with numerology, and for some reason, base 12. I kept seeing the word Theo, and when I Googled it, Sheila Gillette came up, and she channels a group of 12 angelic beings. And then Cryon's work kept coming up. Lee Carroll's a channel as well, and he's one of the few that comes through and says the universe is structured in base 12. So I'm saying, what's all this about base 12? So I dove into so I dove into numerology, but from a base 12 sort of math angle. And then I found this pattern that you mentioned at the start in the prime numbers, which is basically the simplest way we can describe anything mathematically, are just the prime numbers within the cycle. And when we plot that, it forms this double helix vibration. So it looks just like an infinity symbol, but basically lower in the middle at the 6 of love, and higher at the ends at the 0 and 12 of the cycle start and end. So unlike base 10 numerology, which really has no sort of visual blueprint, sort of like astrology, you have the wheel, where all the signs and houses are. Numerology's always lacked that. But so here I had a pattern where when I looked at all of the positions within that vibration, their shape and their orientation matched what ancient numerology said numbers mean. So here I had this mathematical and really a valid physics description of base 12. And that led to me writing a book on specifically base 12 numerology, and then exploring it further, looking into physics. It also matches the structure of atoms, how galaxies form, and also the life cycle of the universe so far. It follows these same, what are called archetypal themes. But again, back to my quality control days, they're qualities of energy as opposed to quantities.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that sort of brought me to where I am today.
Wow, that is so amazing, because you mentioned about the natural cycles, and I'm thinking 12 hours, 12 is on our clock,
Right.
For 24 hours. We have 12 months. Boy, I bet you have a lot of other examples. Can you share those with us?
Yeah, for sure. And actually, a good way to look at it is, both mathematically, physically and spiritually. 12 shows up all over the place, although it's, it's easy to miss. Again, like the clock, we just assume that's how we tell time. But at one point way back, there was an ancient intuition about cycling time that way. And the lunar cycles of the moon around the earth, we're, at least our solar system, we're designed for that 12-month cycle, being earthbound, souls within physical bodies, and then with mathematically, it's quite interesting. Base 12, unlike base 10, which can only be divided like in half or in fifths, so it only have factors of 2 and 5. Base 12 can be divided in halves, thirds, quarters, sixths, or twelfths. So it's like mathematically, it's twice as versatile to express the whole in terms of the parts, or to use a spiritual term, as above, so below. And so it's really mathematically the efficient, logical choice for nature, or for energy just to express itself. So we've, really grown up in a base 10 world, and, and probably because we have, 10 fingers. So that goes way back to ancient civilizations. But, mathematically, we see this 12 showing up. Physically, we see 12 not only in the lunar cycles. We see it in the chromatic scale of music. Full octave is 12 notes. We see it in the light spectrum, which is particularly relevant for Reiki and light workers. The color wheel itself is designed on 12 primary tones or colors. And right down to the subatomic structure of physics, there are 12 matter particles, and their counterpart, 12 antimatter. So we've got this real physical grounding. There's a lot of evidence around us that it's not base 10, it's actually base 12. And personally, I think that's obscured a lot of science in seeing the real truth of the patterns, because we're basically trying to fit a size 10 shoe on a size 10 foot, and mathematically, and a lot of how we explore things. And last but not least, spiritually, there's been a long legacy of base 12, not only in astrology, in the 12 apostles of Christianity, the 12 Greek goddesses and gods, of ancient mythology, and the 12 stages of the wheel of life in Buddhism. So there's a ton of relevance, both mathematically, physically, and spiritually, about 12. But the one holdout has always been numerology in a lot of the modalities. It's been based on what the number systems were at the time, which were predominantly base 10. Back in Egypt, back in ancient Greece, that was base 10. So it's sort of been the one that hasn't caught up to the intuition of base 12, in my opinion.
Yeah. Was anyone else doing this before you saw these patterns?
Actually, they won't. And that was quite frustrating at the start, because it's, I said, I'm going to look into what's base 12 numerology. There's certain aspects in Chinese zodiac and the traditional zodiac and that sort of thing, but it was more in astrology, which is also based on archetypes, just like numerology. But the numerology cycle just stopped at 9. It goes from 0 to 9. So 9 is of completion. So it really, basically I had to look at the cycle. Okay, if we expand the cycle to 12, what does 10 and 11 mean as single digits? Because again, like a clock cycle, they each have their own single energy position. That's really the only difference between base 10 and base 12 numerology. It's expanding that cycle to include 10 and 11. Traditionally, 11's always been illumination in base 10 numerology, but it's basically a full cycle of 10 plus another one. So it was considered a master number. Whereas in base 12, 11 is the end of a light cycle. It's the end of the spectrum of how we experience archetypes. And before that, between 9 and 10 is like the third eye. The third eye is the 10 of awareness. And then the 11 is like the crown chakra. It's the illumination. Then the 12, which gets us back to 0, is like the soul star chakra. So really it, just by substituting sort of definitions for 10 and 11, numerology and everything else works the same as base 12. It's just I didn't have a reference point to make that shift, so I basically adapted it. And have to break a few eggs to make something new. And so, but again,
Right.
so I was a bit of a loner in that respect.
Well, I'm going to say pioneer.
Yeah, much better. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's use that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's use that.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine when you said you looked and you were kind of frustrated. And I mean, I actually got excited thinking, oh, but that means you're on the leading edge, right?
Yeah.
You're pushing into something brand new. Yeah. And yeah, your book, by the way, we'll let our listeners know, it's called Base 12 Numerology, Discover Your Life Path Through Nature's Most Powerful Number, which I think makes beautiful sense with what you've just explained to us and those cycles. I'm really sitting over here though, just I guess I have a memory of many years ago, I was guided for my own personal energy work and healing, to focus on 12 energy centers, which is different than the usual 7, we hear about. And this is coming up for me, I guess, because, there's not much about that out there either, 12 chakras. So that was a little bit, I'm going to say, frustrating for me. Certainly, you brought up other channels, bringing up the 12 and working with 12 in similar ways. But how does this go, this base 12? How does it go with the chakras? Can you explain that a little?
Oh, for sure. And one of the key distinctions, base 10 in general, the metric system we use today, is when you look at the center of the cycle, at the heart of the cycle, isn't the 6 of love, like in astrology and all of, in chakra system, it's the 5 of change. So when we look at that, so that's sort of how I see the base 10 and base 12 cycle, is that the base 12 cycle is centered on the 6 of love, which aligns with, with astrology, the sign of Cancer. It's it occurs in June. But in Reiki, so Reiki's always had the relevance where the heart chakra has always been in the center of the cycle. But if you look at the traditional 7 chakra system, it's the 4th chakra is the heart chakra, root, sacral, solar plexus, and heart. If it's in the 9 chakra system, say if you add the earth star and the soul star, it's the 5th chakra. So really the only one that realigns the 6 of love to where the heart chakra physically is in the chakra system is the base 12 cycle, where it's 1 to 5 on one side and the 6 to 11 on the other. And so I meditated a lot about that too, and I was trying to rationalize, okay, what are these other chakras? So how I sort of see it is the if we went right from 0 to 12, 0 is the root star. It's below our physical chakra system. 1 is our feet, where we first make, ground ourselves as an individual. 2 is the root chakra. And 3 is the sacral. 4 is the solar plexus. And again, this all matches with astrology and traditional numerology. 4 is all about will and safety and security and structure. So now it's starting to line up with what we know in other spiritual traditions. And but between the 4 and the 6 of the heart chakra, there's what I feel is the lower heart. It's the 5 of change. It's the butterflies we get when we're trying something new. It's the trepidation, but the exhilaration, which is beyond structure, but it's not quite that heart where you're actually doing your passion. And then there's the heart chakra as a 6, where it belongs in numerology. And then there's just 7, which I consider the higher heart chakra, where that's the 7 of truth. So once we know something, we've been inspired through love, we have that motivation and that impetus to, okay, this is my truth. Now I have a belief. And with that belief, it ties into the throat chakra, which is all about speaking our truth. So really we need to have that truth, to know that truth through love in order to speak it. And then the 9th chakra is the ears and mouth. It's of communicating our truth. It's of completion of communication. So it's, one's to have your truth. And we probably see that in Reiki a lot, where people have blocked their truth or it's been repressed for some reason. But once we have the spoken word, when we've listened or heard, that's the 9th chakra of completion in numerology. And that brings us to that number in base 12, the 10th of the third eye, insight, awareness, intuition, and then brings us to the 11 of the crown chakra. So really it's substituting 4 more minor chakras.
Mm-hmm.
So by no means does it devalidate the others. It's just that they're talking about I think the main strongest chakras. But when we realign it this way, it now it resonates with the 6 of love, with all of other spiritual traditions where that the seat of our soul belongs. And what I found very interesting, looking at some of your other podcasts, I'm not sure if it's from your physics background or from your intuition or a combination of both. You're the only one that I've seen that does 12 chakra masters, or 12 Reiki masters. Series of 12. And also your Reiki multiplied in physics and in energy. Energy doesn't add, it multiplies. So the effect from one number to the next, right to the 6 of love, it's a logarithmic scale. It's an exponential growth of what we feel. And so, your Reiki multiplied videos, I got to chuckle because that picks up exactly how energy really works. It's not a linear thing. And that's a lot of, as your listeners will, explore new modalities, even chakras, there's a temptation to see, okay, it's only linear. It goes from, root to sacral, but it's really a whole holistic, I see it as basically a torus. Everything relates to everything else.
Mm-hmm.
When we're doing Reiki, it's not about, I'm going to fix this area or that. It's about letting Reiki tell you where it goes. So it really is a whole system on what is drawing you to where the imbalance is. And that to me is what this base 12 numerology and that prime vibration pattern, I see it as the fundamental cycle of qualities that drive everything, physically, spiritually, cosmically, and so on. So it's really about just regaining resonance to what our innate love-based vibration is.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And I mean, I'm having thoughts of biology and DNA, as you're talking, all kinds of things, which I don't know. I could just get lost down these strands of thinking, how everything interrelates. Whoa. Okay. So now most of us are familiar with base 10 numerology. I mean, I even have a little app on my phone, and I don't look at it very often, but every now and then I do. I look at it, and it's all in base 10. So do we need to throw out all of our base 10 stuff, and just fully embrace 12? How do they fit together? I mean, are there must be similarities, I would guess. Can you talk a little about that?
Oh, for sure. No, great question, because that's the most common question that comes up on, because it's a very, very deep tradition steeped in this, in base 10 numerology. And, after hundreds of readings I've done back to back, both, a person or famous people where do it in base 10 and base 12. What I've come to realize is the base 10 cycle, that goes from 0 of potential to 9 of completion, is really more of a physically focused cycle, whereas the base 12 cycle goes from 0 of potential to the 11 of illumination, is sort of the higher vibrational version of it. And just like the numbers themselves, the themes from 1 to 5 are really more physically focused themes of starting something, relating to things, creating structure and doing change. Whereas the themes from 7 to 11, from the 7 of truth to the 11 of illumination, are really their spiritual counterpart. So really base 10, and that's why I often do numerology readings with both, because both of them are relevant. When we're more in a base 10 mindset where, as it relates to our career, how we physically show up in the world, you'll see a lot of strong parallels with our numbers in base 10. But when you look at those same themes in base 12, we see sort of what's the underlying spiritual theme. Why am I pursuing Reiki? Well, this is really what the theme is beneath. Why is someone an engineer? Well, this is actually the theme you're exploring. So they're actually complementary. So one doesn't undo the other.
Oh.
But again,
That's
it's sort of,
nice.
yeah. And so when we're looking just at that base 10, and I had again, I'd probably call myself a spiritual skeptic, even to this day. So even when I, saw numerology, okay, I'm totally on board, but I know, why does it work? So that's why I kept digging in numbers.
Right.
What's the difference between base 12 and base 10? So to this day, I ask why, but I think that's why I'm drawn towards what is the structure beneath it, so I can still rationalize it. So I'm still a being counter by nature, but now it's more of that, what's the physical, spiritual balance between it? So that really is the base 10, base 12 balance. Both are relevant, but base 12 shows what that, when we've opened up our intuition, when we're ready to know more, we see that extra layer of ourselves, which has been there all along. So that's the parallel between the two to me.
Yeah. And so can we look at, I don't know what the right word is, structure of the system. Sure. So in base 10, we calculate certain numbers and then we look up those meanings. Is it the same in base 12, or do you have different sets that you look up?
No, it's totally identical.
Oh, okay. Yep. Like so life path. Right?
Life path's still based on the month, day, and year of birth. Mm-hmm. Your expression number or your calling is still based on your full birth name. And actually, all the other numbers in numerology are derived from numbers within those two, within birth date and birth name. So the only thing that's different is when we're adding numbers together to reduce them to what the numerology number is, we're counting in 12s instead of 10s. That's the only difference. Everything else is identical.
Oh, do we need to learn base 12 to do this? Because I don't know, that might be really, really hard.
Oh yeah, it's a little tough getting your noodle around. Like, where the best way, and it helped me at the start, was always picture the clock cycle, because we're very used to that same time, mm-hmm. And 10's a very distinct energy, 11's very distinct, 12 is sort of back to zero. It's it gets us back to the at high noon or midnight. So it really is a best way to look at it is as that cycle, and it takes a little getting used to. And in my book, I give cheat sheets for what all the numbers mean. Like, it's easier with month of birth is probably easiest, because you already have the 0 to 9. You don't reduce anything because it's already that number. Mm-hmm. In base 12, 10 isn't 1 plus 0 equals 1. It stays as a 10. It's its own energy. Oh. And 11 isn't a master number 11 that reduces to 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's its own energy as illumination. So in base 12, so that's real different. So base 12, a master number 1 would be one full cycle of 12 plus another 1. Master number 22 would be 2 cycles of 12, which is 24, plus another 2. And that's why, for instance, your birth date, and actually we share the same birth date, is birthday of 26 is a master 22 in base 12 numerology. So it's 2 cycles of 12 plus another 2 remainder. Whereas in base 10, it's 2 cycles of 12, 2 cycles of 10 plus a 6 remainder. So again, it's just getting used to that, counting in a full cycle of 12, which is our 10s place when we usually call.
Right. Okay, hold on just a second. Now, you said 26 in base 10 is 2 sets of 10 and 6.
Right.
Totally get that.
Totally makes sense, right?
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But what did you say about base 12? It's because 2 sets of 12 is 24.
Is 24. Yeah, again, the energies, there's still that many numbers we're including.
Right.
But 10 only has 10 of the numbers in one cycle. So it takes more of them to describe any sort of series of numbers. So it's really two. It takes 2 dozen, so it takes fewer full cycles of 12 and a smaller remainder to amount to the same thing. Right.
So, okay. So if I have it right, then in base 12, 26 is 2 cycles of 12. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's 24. And that leaves 2 left over, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That makes some sense there.
Yeah, and what I actually do is what what helps, and it's the notation I use in my book, is for 10 and 11 in the base 12 system, which is also called the dozenal system or duodecimal. A lot of times they substitute either A for 10 and B for 11 or some other cryptic symbols just to show that they aren't double digits, they're special.
Uh-huh.
What I do in my book, the 10 and the 11, I just underline them,
Okay.
so that when people are adding their numbers together, okay, it's 2 plus a 10, that equals 12. Okay, one cycle of 12 plus 0. So it's still, so you can see what 10 is, it's still 10 individual things, but it's just part of the first cycle in base 12. Whereas 10, it's like the full cycle.
Wow.
So beneath it all is still the same number of things we're just counting. Like 12 loaves of bread isn't, oh, here's a pile of 10 over here plus another 2 left over.
Right.
It's just one set of 12.
It's just a matter of grouping.
That's all it is. And that's all what the term base means in mathematics. It's just the base of how you group things.
I see.
But in base 12, if you have 10 loaves of bread, you can either divide them in 2 groups of 5 or 5 groups of 2. You can't divide them in thirds and without getting a knife out.
Right.
You can't divide it in, quarters without getting a knife out. So that's mathematically and energetically why base 12 is superior. It's got all these different versatility of how, again, the whole can be described in terms of its parts. So it's a real, for instance, the number pi and things, there's a lot of what are called irrational numbers, that it's a decimal that goes on forever. There's a lot fewer of those in the base 12 system because things divide evenly, into proportions. So mathematics gets simpler too. And that's really when I found that pattern, was that, and this clean pattern jumps out in base 12, this DNA-shaped double helix. But in base 10, the numbers don't combine that way. It's a real vibrational mess. It doesn't reduce to a single waveform. And mathematically, so again, we're trying to force the decimal system on a lot of natural systems that are structured in 12. So something's lost in the translation.
Yeah. Very fascinating. So if we can sort of wrap our heads around this regrouping, right. I can be on board with that. And I will say, I do have the book, and I have to say, I love your cheat sheets. Totally helped me because I don't have to count all that stuff. So you did a great thing by having the charts and having it there. It makes it really easy for people. And so we've compared the counting method and also some of the terminology and what you calculate. Can we take a look at actually comparing what a reading, a numerology reading in base 10, how that would compare to base 12 as far as actually a specific date of birth and name?
Oh, absolutely. And you're my candidate of choice, of course. You were gracious enough so that I can use your again, in any numerology system, base 12 is no different. The main numbers are our life path, which is derived from our birthday, birth month, birthday, and birth year added together. And that represents why we're here, what we're here to explore, because we all have a main theme. So unlike that, that perfect, base 12 prime pattern, we all come in with an intentionally distorted vibe, something where certain themes are more amplified, other themes are more suppressed, and that ties into what have we learned before in past lives. But we've chosen a certain, package of themes that has its own unique shape, if we looked at it that way. And, so that's really what the life path is all about. And the other main number is derived from our full birth name. So if you have, a first, and if you have middle or multiple middle names and your last name, so not married name, but what's on your, what's on your birth certificate. And that, as opposed to our life path and what we're here to explore, it's our calling, how we best express ourselves, what our natural talents are. Okay. So if we started with your life path, in your case, and it's from your birth date, May 26th of 72. So we add each of those numbers up. But in we first have to reduce them if there's any multiple digits. So first you have a 5 of May, don't have to reduce anything. It's already a single digit. The 26 of your birthday is 2 plus 6 equals 8. And this is base 10 we're doing first. Then in your year of birth, 1972, adds up to 19, or 1 plus 9 equals 10, or 1 plus 0 equals 1. So really, when everyone's life path, a lot of people think it's a single number of, in your case, 5 plus 8 plus 1 is a number. It's actually 3 phases of our life. Your birth month is your theme you'll experience most in youth. Your birthday is a theme you experience during your main adult and working years. And your birth year is the theme you'll experience in the latter part of your life.
I didn't know that. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's another finer point of numerology, which I like to include, but is often left out, is in your case, your 5 plus 8 plus 1 of your full birth date comes to 14. 1 plus 4 equals 5. So it's a life path of the 5 of change in base 10. But whenever a number comes from, it had to be reduced from 2 digits before, I always include that. It's the 14/5, which is a big difference, is that, you're going to explore the theme of change, but specifically through new beginnings of structure and stability, of being independent and creating, and that's, it ties into Reiki and that too. Why that theme? Whereas, say, someone's number, if it came to a 5 directly, say they were born on January 1st and the year, it came to a 1, it would be a single digit, where it didn't have to be reduced. And so some there, if they ended up with a 5 light path, are exploring 5 of change in general, not through a specific theme. So whenever someone's life path comes to a single digit number right away, if it's a 7 of truth, it's a real teacher vibe, education, and that sort of thing. But say it's a 1 plus 6 equals 7, no, it's going to be new beginnings of love. It's going to be more in compassion. It might be in healthcare, that sort of teaching. So it refines what our life path is. So that's just one thing I'd mentioned. So in your case, you're a 14/5, so it's specifically exploring change through new beginnings of structure. Yeah, so if we looked at that from a base 10 angle, which again is that more physical perspective, it's more how you'll, physically show up in the world, what sort of themes you'll explore. So that's, in your case, it's about adapting to change in a practical way. So you'll experience a lot of change in your life, but you have a versatility about that. And lots of physical relocations are often implied in when you have that 5, but particularly when, again, it's a new beginning of structure, new homes, new jobs, new locations. So it's not just a 5 on its own, which is often the energy of, say, athletes, explorers, comedians are often a pure 5. But when you're a 1 plus 4, 5, you're doing it more. You're going to be moving a lot, so keep your bags packed. This sort of energy.
I think I've moved over 20 times in my life.
Yeah, what's also really interesting, in base 10 again, related to what you physically pursue in life. 1 plus 4, about 5, is about new beginnings of structure. So you went from a physicist of discovering what's the creation of structure at a universal level, and now you're exploring Reiki. What's the structure of energy and at a physical level, at a personal level? So really, there's a complete parallel.
Yeah.
Again, those are more related to what your physical pursuits are.
Wow. Yeah.
Now it gets really interesting when you look at this in base 12. Again, the same, your life path is still the same 3 numbers, birth, month, day, and year. Your birthday is still 5, because whether we're talking in 10s or 12s, 5 is a single digit. Your birthday of 26, as we mentioned before, is 2 cycles of 12, plus another 2. So that's a 22. And whenever you get these numbers, they're called master numbers, whenever you get double digits like that. And the idea is that they're exploring the 2 energy, but at a higher octave. So whenever you have a master number, you have, in moments of inspiration, you're working at mastering duality, of physical, spiritual duality, of exploring how both of them work together. And then in daily routine, and when you're not, as engaged, it reverts to 2 + 2 = 4. It reverts to structure, it reverts to need for stability and safety. So you'll have, whenever you have master number in your case, and same with me, because my birthday is 26th of January, we have, when we're fully engaged in that, we really explore that duality of everything, of relationships, and it really ties in with physical spiritual duality. That's why we're both really drawn to that work. And again, that birth month, that's the middle of the 3 growth cycles of our life. That's our career. That's our main focus that come up there.
Wow. Okay.
And then your year of birth in base 12 comes to 3, the 3 of the catalyst. So when we combine those, the 5 plus the 22, again, we don't reduce that, plus the 3, we get 2 12s plus another 10 remainder, which is 2 plus 10 in base 12, which is 1 cycle of 12 plus 0 remainder. Again, we're counting clock cycles. So in base 12, your life path is the 1-0/1. It's of new beginnings and independence through new beginnings of potential. And it's really more, this is the more of what your spiritual calling is beneath that. Beneath how you show up in a base 10 way, in a physical way. This is more spiritually what you came here to do. And, what's really interesting is Reiki, REIKI, is also 1-0/1. So your life path in base 12 is exactly Reiki's vibration in numerology.
Whoa.
This is very fascinating. And
that is really fascinating.
Right. And actually, when you look at the, it's not just Reiki on its own, it's the 1. It's the 1 plus 0 = 1. It's Reiki, but making it more mainstream. What's its broader potential? The 1 plus 0. It's the, it's expanding Reiki, like this podcast, beyond the Reiki Gateway.
Yeah.
So exploring Reiki, you're inevitably drawn to what are the other branches that Reiki is a gateway for. So it's not being a purely Reiki, it's being 1 plus 0 Reiki. It's that new beginnings of other potentials. What's that broader potential? And what's really cool is when I heard some of your other podcasts on how you had that awakening in Egypt when, I think it was when you're placing your hands on the Sphinx at the time.
Yeah.
And that too is, it's not just related to people, but it's people and animals. It's a mythical creature that is a hybrid of both person and an animal. And then if I can go on, because we're on a roll here.
Sure.
Your spirit guide who showed up, Francis, also equals a 1-0/1, only in base 12 though. And so not only was your awakening through the Sphinx, which was a broadened perspective of both man and beast, your spirit guide of Francis is the patron saint of both, people and animals. So there's a direct parallel, not only numerologically what the numbers add to, but what the relevance is as a theme, as an archetype. Isn't that really cool?
That is really cool, especially because, you use the word archetype, and that whole seminar I went to over there in Egypt was about archetypes, and I had no idea what the heck that even was when I went over there. So I'm over here just, wow.
And the deeper level, I heard you mention you actually had to look up that Bernardone is St. Francis, but it actually came through as Bernardone, didn't he? When you first...
He did. I just heard Bernard, and then I felt afterwards.
Yeah, there's something at the end,
Yeah, because it wasn't in my vocabulary.
Right. So Bernardone, sure enough, in base 12 numerology, it equals the 7 of truth. But you didn't realize Bernardone was St. Francis until 7 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, when you had your awakening was when you were 26, which is base 12, 22. So that was your gateway into what your whole career, what your middle stage was going to be, a master 22. So it occurred when you were 26, but the spiritual awakening to really what that meant didn't happen for 7 years. And that's the energy of Bernardone versus St. Francis. So really, it seems it came through. You were getting a lot of nudges of your numbers are most relevant, but in base 12. And I think you had mentioned too at one point that you were waking up a lot in the morning at 4:20.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people wake up at 4:44 or see 44.
Yep. Yep.
Whenever I've seen
That's
people,
me too, actually. I have to tell you, 44 is my number.
Okay.
Really. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's coming up too. We'll touch on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but on the whenever it comes to like 4:20, that's again nudging you towards looking at time as a clock cycle, not as a digital clock, because on a clock the two hands align at 4. So same goes if someone's a master 1-1, they'll often see time of 1:05. Or people who are a master 22, it'll be 2:10 because the two hands are aligned on the clock. Master 33s will often wake up at 3:15 because it's 3 hands at clock. And
interesting.
Yeah, so there's a lot of clues in how synchronicities and signs show up. So I'll mention that to your listeners, where don't just look at what the numbers are, but what format are they showing up in? Are they showing up in a clock cycle? Or are they showing up in more digitally, a string of numbers, which is often a hint that it relates to something linear, more of a physical message. Once you start seeing in a cycle, it's often more base 12, more of that full. It's more related to illumination somehow. So it's very cool when you see when things happen, how they happen, how many things come on. I always see 3 crows together. Okay, what's this about 3? Things like that. So that's the what was really profound with not only that we're meeting on this podcast, but that your spirit guide was St. Francis. My brother, who had passed just before my awakening, was also a Franciscan monk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so his role model was St. Francis. And actually the anniversary of when he passed was exactly 12 years ago, June 6th. So just a few days ago. So actually,
yes.
I'm resonating very heavily with this energy, which again, the June 6th is the 10/1. It's one cycle of 12. So my big awakening experience resonates with your life path, which resonates with what you do with Reiki, which resonates with your awakening, which was both man and animal, healing. So and your listeners will find that a lot when every encounter we have, or it could even be a conflict we have at work, there's always a resonance. Even if it seems like dissonance, it might be a polarity, but there's always, if we look closer, there's always this string of pearls. And numerology really shows a lot of those. So that's what I find fascinating about it. So just glancing at your numbers, the more I went into it, everything's tied to it. And another sign of someone who is very intuitive like yourself is what you name your business and what you name this podcast. When you look at it, it's mainstream Reiki, as your business. So it's not just Reiki, the one energy, it's expanding Reiki to a broader potential, 1+0. And same with beyond the Reiki Gateway. It's not Reiki, but it's beyond Reiki, expanding what other potentials and modalities can we explore that would help your listeners, amplify their Reiki abilities. So it's really intuitively, you've named exactly what your life path is.
Yeah. Wow. Cool? That is really cool. Yeah. And it makes me remember, when I came up with these different things, or, how the guidance was. And it just really makes a person wonder how much, how much our thinking mind plays a part or not.
Yeah.
Like you, I grew up, I was all about the questions and all about the, if I couldn't see it, I didn't believe it. We have a lot in common, I think, Michael.
And actually, where you started with physics, now that's my main exploration, but from a spiritual angle. So actually, there's this polarity too. It's just we came at it from opposite ends.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that something? Huh. Wow. Okay.
Actually, one thing that might help too is if I did a capsule summary of your life path, again, it's how the three numbers are three phases of your life.
Mhm.
So really in your youth, it was you explored the five of change, and that prepared you, that gave the adaptability to explore the 22/4 of mastering duality, the high notes, or mastering structure and stability, in more at the lower octave of that. And then that mastery of structure ties into your third growth cycle, which is, in your case, is all about the 1/2/3 of the catalyst through new beginnings of duality. So from mastery of structure in that and your Reiki practice later in life, which is often early 60s and beyond, you'll be an influential catalyst of helping others discover their duality. So you can see how the three numbers, they always relate to each other. The youth prepares you for what you're exploring in midlife, and that prepares you for the other. But overall, they're tied to that certain theme. So really cool.
Wow. That's just fascinating. Wow. Can you give us another example of maybe a famous person that we might relate to and their numbers, how those look? That was awesome, by the way. I just have to say,
Oh, sure.
I have to digest all of that.
Sure. One thing I wanted to mention before we go to your expression number is a personal year that you're in. So this year is actually very relevant to you because it's what your date of birth and month of birth plus 2023. So in base 10, that's the 20/2 of duality through new duality of potential. And this is the year of you and your prior co-host, Kathleen, physically going separate ways to explore new potentials of the 2+0. Well, in base 12, your personal year is the 17/8. And this is its deeper meaning of manifesting your individual truth, of the 8 through the 1+7. So although in the base 10 context, it means a physical, amicable parting of ways, but the underlying theme, why you're doing this, is to show up with your own truth in how you manifest that truth. So you're resonating strongly this year with that theme of what you're meant to do. So it's exactly, divinely timed, and you're feeling that, and you're both feeling that. Said, okay, this is the right time. So it perfectly dovetails with that.
Wow.
Which I thought is really neat. Yeah.
Wow. Mind blowing. It's about all I can come up with at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
And again, it's with looking at both base 10 and base 12 together. So at the very least, so I don't get a lot of hate mail from other numerologists. So now we'll move on to your expression number.
Okay.
Again, this is your calling and what your natural talents are, really what you're here to, how can you best express yourself. In base 10, your three birth names add up to the 11 of illumination. So in a more physical context, you're here to literally be a light worker, one who works with light, with Reiki, with source energy. So that totally dovetails with what you do. In base 12, your expression number is at the 13/4. It's of structure through new beginnings of the catalyst. So basically, you're here to be an innovative catalyst of stability. And so that's sort of the underlying theme of why you're working with light in a base 10 context. You're here really to give people that security, the structure, and sense of safety and knowing themselves at a more spiritual level. And which is really cool. Now you're and this, you can see this 4 number come up a lot too. And I think you mentioned 4 number, that appears, a lot for you. And so you see this, it's not only your second growth cycle of your life path, which is what your career is focused on, that 22/4. It's also your base 12 expression number is really what you're here to do. So 4s follow you all over the place.
Yeah.
And sure enough, this is your 4th season of the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
When the 2+2 was supposed to play out.
Oh, gosh, it just never ends. Yeah. And you might not even know this, Michael, but because this is happening really now behind the scenes, I'm actually building an online community, a standalone online community to help Reiki people all the way from if they're just curious about Reiki,
Right.
to every level, of practitioner, so that they can go further and succeed in whatever way they choose to, incorporate Reiki in their lives, because I've just seen a need for it, a need for support. And I'm sorry, I just get excited thinking about it. But
Yeah.
so I'm building this structure as we speak.
Yeah. And once again, its mission is to expand the potential of Reiki, of the 1 + 0 = 1.
Yes.
So again, it's all.
Yeah. And every person in there, every particular person, to help them expand
Right.
themselves. Yes.
That is so cool. Yeah. And, if you're, a couple other things I'll touch on, which is quite interesting, is what our current name is. In your case, Andrea Kennedy, which is your husband's surname, which you adopted when you got married. And there's always a relevance to when we feel drawn to adopt our spouse's name or not. It's always fascinating. Why is that? In your case, your life path is to be independent, have that initiative, that authenticity, true to yourself, the 101. But your husband's last name, Kennedy, is the 11 of illumination. Whenever you add the 11 to any number, it just illuminates more of the same. Mathematically, it drops out. So it's it's like in base 10 is multiples of 9. 18 still equals 1 + 8 = 9. 27 still equals 2 + 7 = 9, numerology. Same thing in base 12 numerology, except multiple 11s cancel out. So basically, you would have felt that when you, when you first met, is that it doesn't distort my sense of authenticity, because that's what my calling is this life around. It just helps illuminate it. So he'll be an enabler of who you want to be on your own as well.
Yes.
So,
and I have to say, that is how it's played out. Absolutely. Yeah.
And what that, and there's more. And that name Kennedy, when you look at it in base 10, so again, how your husband would more show up physically in the world and career and so on, is the Master 33 of the Master Catalyst, which is all about the creative alchemist. And I understand was a chemical engineer, in life. But it's also all about creativity. Now he's immersed in doing art as an artist.
Yeah.
So what his number resonates with is really how he shows up in the world.
Oh,
but
my
again,
goodness.
In a base 12 perspective, it is still that 11 of illumination that doesn't influence or distort your personal vibe. So you both, just in your names, it felt, oh yeah, absolutely, I'll adopt his name. You could feel that intuitively inside. Whereas other people intentionally take the name because it's bringing something new. In your case, Kennedy has 5 more 5s in it, by the way, when you look at letter energies.
Oh.
So although it doesn't change your life path, it brings a lot more 5 of change. So probably a lot of the change you experienced was more due to him, due to his career, to his relocations, not so much your own. So that's sort of embedded within that Kennedy name as well. That's meant to be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And because in youth, you were a 5, your birth month of May. When you met, presumably then, you were in the 5 energy. His name resonates with all these 5s. So that would have magnetically attracted you as well.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's useful for your listeners to see, when did they meet someone? What phase are they in? And then look at those numbers.
Yeah. It seems like the more you look, the more you find.
Yeah.
It just goes on and on. Wow. That's so incredible. Does this work for events as well?
Oh, absolutely. A prime example is 9/11. Terrorist events. That's etched in the global consciousness. And it's when you look at the numbers, the 9 and the 11 in base 12 numerology, it's the 9 of physical endings and completion, and what the destruction that represented. But it's also the 11 of illumination, of this is illuminating some deeper truth about the futility of war and terrorism, but it's really energizing that in a specific event. It's all about this this duality of of humanity's potential, to be honest. And it's really that resonating with how do we have this sense of separation and fear, and how do we restore that? So even when we look at the structure of the Twin Towers, it was all about the duality in what was the focus of the attack. And it's interesting, the building they restructured, I think it's called Unity Tower, but it's a single tower now. So even what resonated with, the lesson was heard by a lot of people, and just, okay, this is a wake-up call to be unified and to change that. And, again, it said we're in this consciousness shift. And so there's a lot of what looks like extreme duality, but it's really focused on creating unity. So we just have to look at the relevance of the theme. And, hopefully an event like that will never happen again, but we're seeing a lot of polarity recently in years. And it's again, that transition from where they say we're in third dimensional physical focus, and we're on our way to the fifth. When you look at the numerology, it's really fourth is about relaxing structure and flexibility. So we're going to see a lot of the old structures and hierarchies break down as we rebuild the new that are flexible, that are based on that, the five of change. And the five is the stepping off point to love. So we have to get to that point of dismantling the third energy, and getting the five of change and having the courage to do so. So really we have everyone's somewhere between the 3, 4, and 5 energies. And the light workers are sort of more on this end. But again, it's like a lot of your listeners will resonate, where it's not what you do or how you do it or trying to influence others. It's just being who you are. It's like when doing a Reiki treatment, it's let Reiki point you where to go. It's not efforting, so that's, so that's 9/11's a classic example of what it represents energetically and how we're responding to it afterwards. And if you look at in 2016, a lot of change started happening there politically and everything else.
Yes.
In base 12, 2016 is actually the start of a new energetic century. It's 1200 in numerology.
Oh.
So it's 1, 12 to the cube, it's 1728 plus 1, 144, 12 squared, with no remainder. So actually that was a start of an energetic cycle where we left the previous base 12 century of the 1-1, of mastery of self, of independence, of self-interest, of ego. And now we're exploring the 1200 of new beginnings of duality, both of separation and dismantling of the old and coming together and connecting of the new. So a lot of awakenings happened all around that period, whether it's 2014, 16, 17. A ton of people are waking up, and it's in the base 12 resonance of it it's that new open-ended potential. It's the 1-2 plus 0-0. It's an open-ended wildcard potential of, okay, how are we going to respond now in this duality way, through relationship, not through that self-interest? So it's a very critical time, and that's a bit of a marker for me. It's not just 2012, as in the Mayan calendar and so on. 2016 and base 12 is a real milestone of, okay, now we're going to explore new beginnings of duality. And the next century, 144 years later, will be the 1300, new beginnings of the catalyst. So that'll now be where now we're all creative influencers exploring that depth of our creativity. But first we have to get through this sort of icky duality stage of seeing a lot of dismantling and what's not relevant for us anymore. Including me. Like, it was when I was 51 where that was my wake-up call. It was, the manufacturing career. I just couldn't go back to it anymore. No idea what I was going to do, but I just felt it in my bones that, nope, this is that switch.
Yeah. Very fascinating, Michael. And, we didn't even really talk about mediumship or any, you have so much, I think that you offer.
Thank you.
Not just in the book, but in your work, and you're putting yourself out there as well. If our listeners want to find out more about you, if they want to contact you, how can they best do that, Michael?
Well, for sure. My website is michaelsmith12, the number 12.com, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. And my YouTube channel is Base 12 Universe.
Nice.
And now I'm not doing private readings anymore. So I'm really focusing on putting out my material, creating videos on YouTube, sharing what I know. My website's more of a do-it-yourself numerology. So I really step through every step, how you can do your own reading.
Oh, nice.
And then, and I'm focusing on new book projects. Yeah, so that's really my current trajectory. So,
oh, very exciting. Yeah. I just want to thank you so much for being here and shining a light on this. And
my pleasure. Yeah.
I have to just remind you before we sign off here, pioneer. That's what I want you to take away from this. You're a pioneer in numerology, and so thankful for you to come and be here and share this knowledge. And, I would say for me, it was very illuminating because, very illuminating. I didn't know there was anything beyond the base 10. And you've described this, I think, beautifully and simply, and opened a whole nother door, that I certainly had no idea was even there. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. No, it was my pleasure. It's, it's always a treat, to speak with kindred spirits, but also with your listeners and your viewers. Everyone watches a certain podcast or show or gravitate to a certain mentor for a reason, so it'll be interesting to see comments from your viewers and so on, what the relevance of 12 was to them. So it's, everything's divinely timed, isn't it?
It is. It certainly is. And I'm sure a lot of them, they will be looking up their numbers so that they can learn more about themselves. And I just think it doesn't get any better than that. So
absolutely. Great. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, our pleasure. Thank you. This episode is sponsored by the new Mainstream Reiki community, where we bring together Reiki practitioners of all levels, all styles, and lineages to build a supportive, like-minded community, continue our education and practice together so that we can deepen our understanding of Reiki, explore related topics, and empower ourselves and each other to practice Reiki with more confidence. Join us for live Reiki practice, participate in group mentoring sessions and conversations to share insights and connect with other Reiki practitioners in a welcoming atmosphere, free of social media and advertising. If you'd like to learn more, please visit members.mainstreamreiki.com. Thank you again for joining me. Please check the description underneath this video to learn more, connect with us, and get some important information about your listening experience. Wishing you all the best until we meet again beyond the Reiki Gateway.